السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين. We continue inshallah ta'ala with the book of Ma'arij al-Qabul and continuing with some of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that all of the attributes of Allah to be believed in the way they are in the Quran and in the Sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, without denying or negating or altering or doing any of these things that the deviants fell into that trap with التشبيه, with التمثيل, with التعطيل, and to leave the matter the way it is in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet عليه الصلاة والسلام. And the meaning is clear, but the how of it, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. So we stopped here at the title where it says يجب الإيمان بصفة النزول لله تعالى. يجب الإيمان بصفة النزول لله تعالى وإمراره كما جاء. It's an obligation to believe in the صفة, in the attribute of النزول. النزول, the descending of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and وإمراره, and to pass it the way it comes. That means without going into the how these things are, without going into since, therefore, any of these types of things. Just to believe what's mentioned the way it's mentioned, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala best of how these attributes are. And a very simple thing to always remember, that these are matters of al-ghaib. And al-ghaib, the unseen, it is not permissible to, and it does not even make sense to engage into trying to understand the essence of it when it's ghaib, when it's unseen. We only receive the revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's why we have to keep it the way it is. And al-qiyas, or analogy, and all of these types of things, it's with what is already seen in the life of the people, not with regards to the unseen. So the life of the Sulam Al-Wusool that we have here is وقد روى الثقات. This is, I believe, maybe number 60 or so. وقد روى الثقات عن خير الملا بأنه عز وجل وعلا في ثلث الليل الأخير ينزل يقول هل من تائب فيقبل هل من مسيء طالب للمغفرة يجد كريما قابلا للمعذرة. It seems like we stopped before that. سبحان الله. طيب. يمن بالخيرات والفضائل ويستر العيب ويعطي السائل. So we'll continue with that inshallah. We stopped at the middle of page 376. طيب, I take it back inshallah. So this is where we stopped here. So we're still in the subject of Al-Quran and the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that Al-Quran is kalamullah tabaraka wa ta'ala. And here there's a very important mas'ala here in the subject that the deviants had mentioned. So he respond to it by what's mentioned here, this title, Al-Lafdhiyya Jahmiyya, وهم الذين يقولون لفظي بالقرآن مخلوق. لفظي بالقرآن مخلوق. طيب, I think we didn't go through this one. طيب. No, طيب. So what is al-lafdhiyya? Al-lafdhiyya refers to those who talk about al-lafz. Al-lafz is what's uttered, right? What's being uttered with one's tongue, with one's speech. So they talked about al-lafz. لفظي بالقرآن. They would say this. They would say, my love of the Quran is makhluk. My utterance of the Quran is makhluk, is creation. It sounds, when a person says this, as that makes sense because we're creation of Allah. So my utterance of the Quran is a creation of Allah. But he says here that those who would say this, they are Jahmis in principle. They follow the Jahmis in their statements, in their belief. وهم الذين يقولون لفظي بالقرآن مخلوق. My utterance of the Quran is makhluk, is creation. There's details to this, but as you see, these types of statements, was it mentioned like that as a matter of belief in the Quran, in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, any of the Sahaba radiallahu anhum, or the three generations of the righteous ones ever said something like this? The answer is no. So you can see obviously very clear that this is something that is invented. And that's how deviation happens. If people would just stay to what is mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ without going beyond, and again, it's an unseen matter, so then they start saying sins, therefore, and getting into things where it's unseen. It's not about making sense or not making sense. The unseen is to believe in it according to what the wahy came with. But there's details to this, so that once you hear the details, it becomes very easy to understand. So hopefully, inshallah ta'ala, everybody follows with what we read, and then we'll see how it's summarized at the end, inshallah. So here this mas'ala, he said, اشتهر عن السلف الصالح. It's been widespread from الشهرة, something that is well known, famous among السلف الصالح كأحمد بن حنبل وهارون الفروي وجماعة أئمة الحديث أن اللفظية جهمية. So it's been mentioned here about, that the lafziyya, they call them al-lafziyya, that there are Jahmis. And the Jahmis, those who deny the attributes of Allah. So remember, the word al-lafziyya refers to the group of people. They would refer to the lafz. وَاللَّفْظِيَّةُ, who are they? هم من قال لفظي بالقرآن مخلوق. My lafz, my utterance of the Quran is makhluk, is creation of Allah. He says, قال أئمة السنة رحمهم الله تعالى. The Imam of the Sunnah at that time, they said, ومن قال لفظي بالقرآن غير مخلوق فهو مبتدع. Listen to this very carefully. And this is based on what I just mentioned about the innovations in words, the innovations, bid'ah, in inventing ways and terminologies. That is wrong. He says, whoever says, لفظي بالقرآن, my utterance of the Quran is not makhluk, right, which is the opposite of what the title is. Whoever says that it's not makhluk, فهو مبتدع. He is innovator. He's مبتدع في الدين, which is a wrong thing to do. But then here يعنون غير بدعية الجهمية. They mean by this not the bid'ah of the Jahmis, right? So this is not Jahmiya. This is not what the Jahmiyas are about, but it's still bid'ah. Whoever says لفظي بالقرآن غير مخلوق. So if the Jahmis, they say لفظي بالقرآن مخلوق والعياذ بالله, can you refute that, or can you say no, what you said is wrong? But what is right is to say لفظي بالقرآن غير مخلوق, not creation. No, you already fell into the bid'ah of saying that. So neither one is correct, but one is worse than the other in the categories of evil, right? So to say لفظي بالقرآن غير مخلوق, that's whoever says this, he's مبتدع. He's an innovator. But it's not the bid'ah of the Jahmis. We're still in this part, right? وذلك لأن اللفظ يطلق على معنيين. That is because a lafz, or what's uttered, is when it's mentioned, it refers to two meanings. أحدهما الملفوظ به, one of which is الملفوظ به, what's been uttered itself. وهو القرآن, which is the Quran. وهو كلام الله. This is the speech of Allah. ليس فعل العبد ولا مقدورا له. It's not actions of the slave of Allah, and he has no capacity to it. So what's al-malfuz? Al-malfuz here, right? It is al-malfuz. What is being uttered is the Quran. And the Quran, every time we say the Quran has been uttered, but it's the Quran. Then it's kalamullah. Kalamullah, one of the attributes of Allah. والثاني, the other meaning by al-lafz, means التلفظ, the actual utterance of whatever is being uttered. وهو فعل العبد. This is the action of the abd, the slave of Allah, the human being. وكسبه وسعيه. This is what he earns, this is what he get of rewards and so on. فإذا أطلق لفظ الخلق على المعنى الثاني, if the love of al-khalq, the creation, is mentioned about the second one, that this is the action of al-abd, and it's a person says لفظي بالقرآن مخلوق, and he refers to his own as a human being's action. But if it's mentioned like this, شمل الأول, it will include the first one, which is الملفوظ, which is the actual utterance or the what's being uttered. وهو قول الجهمية. Right? This is if a person just says لفظي بالقرآن مخلوق, and he means the first meaning of it, which is if they mean the first one, if it's, of course, this is the way of the Jahmis. If they mean the actual action of the human being, right, and but they still say لفظي بالقرآن, that means it will include the first one. وإذا عكس الأمر, and if he do it the other way around, بأن قال لفظي بالقرآن غير مخلوق, if he says my utterance of the Quran is not مخلوق, شمل المعنى الثاني, he would basically says the second meaning, وهي بدعة أخرى من بدع الاتحادية. This is another بدعة, the بدعة of الاتحادية. الاتحادية, those who talk about unity, that Allah and His creation are one and things like this. And it's very obvious that it's bid'ah because none had mentioned this or said that. He says وهذا ظاهر عند كل عاقل. This is very clear to every person of عقل and intellect. فإنك إذا سمعت رجلا يقرأ, if you heard a man sing قل هو الله أحد, reciting قل هو الله أحد, تقول هذا لفظ سورة الإخلاص, you say this is the words, the utterance of سورة الإخلاص, وتقول هذا لفظ فلان بسورة الإخلاص, and you would say that this is the utterance of so and so reciting Surah Al-Ikhlas. إذ اللفظ, so therefore the word اللفظ معنى مشترك, it's a common meaning بين التلفظ الذي هو فعل العبد وبين الملفوظ به الذي هو كلام الله عز وجل. It's a common meaning that includes التلفظ. التلفظ is the action of the human being, his actual action, his action of uttering, which is the action of the slave of Allah, and it's a combination of this and the other one, which is al-malfuz bihi, what is being uttered, which is kalamullahi azza wa jal. This is how when a person says this, he says وهذا بخلاف ما ذكر السلف بقولهم. This is different than what the Salaf said. الصوت صوت القارئ والكلام كالباري. الصوت صوت القارئ والكلام كلام الباري. السلف, they said that الصوت, the sound, is the sound of the reciter, and the speech is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala al-Bari, the creator. Right? So الصوت here, فإن الصوت معنى خاص. الصوت is a special meaning بفعل العبد, by the action of the human being. لا يتناول المتلو المؤدى بالصوت, does not include, when you say الصوت, you don't include in the meaning of a صوت what is being recited. Right? This is the sound, not the utterance of the words. البتة, whatsoever. ولا يصلح أن تقول هذا صوت قل هو الله أحد. And you cannot say this is صوت قل هو الله أحد. Right? You can't say that. This is the sound of قل هو الله أحد. ولا يقول ذلك عاقل, and no عاقل would ever say that. إنما تقول هذا صوت فلان. The word صوت, and this is, as you see here, it's a linguistic thing, right? But it leads people to say things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not say. And it leads them to fall into what's worse. That's what ilm al-kalam is. And that's what, using words and what it entails and things like this, where we stay away from all of this. Right? And to only say what is being said in the Quran and the Sunnah. But as he says here, the difference between al-lafz wa al-sawt, as a natural thing, that when you speak, you would say صوت فلان يقرأ قل أحد. So and so is reciting قل أحد. This is his, you're talking about his sound. He has a good voice like this. ونحو ذلك. نعم إذا سمع كلام الله عز وجل منه تعالى بدون واسطة كسماع موسى عليه الصلاة والسلام. He says, yes, if a person heard heard the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala like this without any intermediaries, like Musa alayhi salam when he heard the speech of Allah, and the sama' of Jibreel alayhi salam, and the sama' and the listening of the people of Jannah, كلامه منه عز وجل. فحينئذ التلاوة والمتلو صفة للباري عز وجل. Therefore, in that case, the recited and what's being recited is all from the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. ليس منها شيء مخلوق. There's nothing مخلوق in it. تعالى الله علوا كبيرا. If it's heard directly, and that's why when where the Ahlul Sunnah, when they say that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke the Quran بحرف وصوت, with letter and sound. This is how they say. So ما قاله لا يقبل التبديل. This is part of the line of the Sulam Al-Wusool here, which as he says ما يقبل ما قاله لا يقبل التبديل كلا ولا أصدق منه قيل. So this is, we just finished here. فالصوت والألحان صوت القارئ لكنما المتلو قول الباري. So the sound and the melodies and so on, this is the sawt, this is the voice of the reciter. But the matlu, but what is being recited is the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's just a specific matter about a love and linguistic matter, and it led them with ilmul kalam and things like this, to stay away from this, and how it can lead the person to be among the deviant ones. So that one line, ما قاله لا يقبل التبديل. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said does not be accepted whatsoever to be changed or altered. قال الله تعالى ما يبدل القول لدي. The speech does not change, not to be exchanged. وقال تعالى واتل ما أوحي إليك من كتاب ربك لا مبدل لكلماته. No change to the words of Allah. وقال تعالى وتمت كلمة ربك صدقا وعدلا لا مبدل لكلماته وهو السميع العليم. وقال تعالى لا تبديل لكلمات الله. The words of Allah not to be changed. He says كلا ولا أصدق منه قيل. Nay, أي لا يكون ذلك. This is not to be whatsoever. ولا أصدق منه. There's no one more truthful than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. أي من الله تعالى قيلا أي قولا, speech. and قيلا وهو تمييز محول عن اسم لا. So this is تمييز, comes from لا أصدق منه قيل. والتقدير لا قيل أصدق من قيله. The taqdeer is because of this tamiz, as if it's being said, there's no qeel, there's no speech more truthful than the speech of Allah. ولا أصدق منه قيل. قال الله تبارك وتعالى الله لا إله إلا هو لا يجمعنكم إلى يوم القيامة لا ريب فيه ومن أصدق من الله حديثا. Who is more truthful than Allah in his hadith. وقال تعالى في الآية الأخرى ومن أصدق من الله قيلا. أي من أصدق من الله تعالى في حديثه وخبره ووعده وعيده. Who is more truthful than Allah in his speech and his khabar, news, and his promise and his warnings. الجواب لا أحد, no one. وفي خطبة رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال إن أصدق الحديث كلام الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. الحديث, as we hear always in خطبة الحاجة, إن أصدق الحديث كلام الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. So this is and was ended with speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then after that he talks about sifatun nuzul with these lines of poetry. So but we'll stop here inshallah. Again, we've been cutting short every for the past few sessions. It's okay inshallah, so that you take a little break inshallah, so that you can memorize also the lines here. We're reached line number 60 for those who are memorizing, and to understand the meanings of it, and make your notes, and make some summaries to all the points that are mentioned in the Sharh. It's good, and we could have read the Mukhtasar already of the book, but it's best that you would make your own Mukhtasar, that you would make your own summarized version of the book by putting the Masail one after the other with what's mentioned in the Sharh. And as mentioned before, that this is inshallah ta'ala will continue like that, the way that we're doing it like this inshallah till the end of this study year, which is the end of August inshallah. And then after that, with the new year to start, which is we started in September inshallah, and hopefully we'll finish that first volume, and the kalam of Tawheed al-Ithbat wal-Ma'rifah. Then after that, we're not going to read every word, but it's going to be reading assignments, and we read some portions of it. But you will be responsible of reading every word of it, inshallah, with memorizing, of course, Sulam, Al-Wusool, and covering more things, inshallah. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept. And as a message, inshallah ta'ala, is going to be sent, that we won't have durus, inshallah, till Wednesday, inshallah. So for this less than a week, if you can, go back and read, inshallah, and make a schedule to read as much as you can from the beginning, or from, especially with the lines, to understand what it means. And the same thing with fiqh and with the tafsir. And there will be a quiz shortly, inshallah ta'ala, will be announced. Just some multiple choice, some easy things, inshallah, but just to review, inshallah, and to make sure that everything is clear and understood. If you have any questions, inshallah, please go ahead. And we have to repeat that the way that we learn this, the matters of deen, it doesn't really work with the way that, in the sense of ilm, that it becomes like the universities and things like this, where exams and evaluating the students based on exams. This is something that it has to be done, yes, and this is one of the ways. How can they know that a person learned or not? But it does not graduate a alim or even a student of knowledge, because this is ibadah. So it requires ikhlas, sincerity, and truthfulness, and only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. And that's why it's about acting upon what we learn, and that shows in our actions and our speech and our ibadah. Otherwise, what's the point of all of this? Is to be upon the deen and to have the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So everyone is, including myself, of course, inshallah, is to work on our ibadah, our awrad, our salawat, to do it in the most perfect way, to do it in jama'ah, to have the night prayer, and to establish the night prayer, to work on the Quran, to have the word of the Quran, the adhkar. Otherwise, this ilm that we learn, becomes of no benefit whatsoever, unless we benefit ourselves from it, inshallah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept, inshallah. So the attendance code is Kalamul Bari. Kalamul Bari. There's a question: what advice do you have for an individual experiencing ishq for someone else that is not strong in their deen? The word that you mentioned has the answer. The word ishq, that means it's evil, right? Because it's sinful. And that's why a person has to stay away from it and repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the ishq is when the heart is attached to someone. They call it love, level of different levels of love, but the word al-mahabba is not fair to be given for such a feeling towards someone that is not a husband and a wife. Outside the fold of marriage, they call it ishq because it's sinful, it's evil, it's from shaitan and nothing else. The ishq is from shaitan. The al-mahabba, al-mawadda, this is what is halal, this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made as permissible. So when a person knows this, and he knows that he got himself to that trap of shaitan, that one step after the other, allowing to see, to look, allowing to listen, allowing to talk, allowing to have relationship outside the fold of marriage, even if it's just talking to one another. And that's why, to avoid mixing and to avoid this closeness even in the same community among people, so that people don't fall into this corruption of the hearts. So to know that is very important. To know that the heart has a disease is very important, and that's why a person has to repent to Allah and to turn to Allah and to increase their ibadah and dhikr, and to stay away from anything to do with that individual, with even if it for the person to go to another city and to move away and to cut all kinds of relationships and all of these types of things. And to be patient, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cure the heart this way. Otherwise, all of these other things, it doesn't work. And of course, if you see in some of the narrations where the cure to it is for people to get married, if that's feasible, then mashallah, this is something to be done, but still to repent to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So it's to be, or to occupy oneself with the Quran, with the dhikr of Allah, with turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, with dua, to think of the hereafter. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cure the hearts, inshallah. And it's a matter of time. This is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. People forget. Now, for Saturday, not this weekend, inshallah, we won't have memorization. Unless, inshallah, if the brothers would do it together, that will be good, inshallah. It'll be a different time zone even for to figure out to be precise, inshallah. طيب, barakallahu fikum. Anything else, inshallah? If someone, adult child under the age of 21, still in the parents' household, can we make conditions for them? Like if they want to do something, we need them to listen to a lecture. Wallahi, if they would listen, mashallah, this is good. This is what the dilemma that we all face when it comes to an adult living with you, even if it's your son. In one aspect, that they're adult, they're responsible for their actions. So you cannot really, in principle, you cannot force them in a sense where at the end they're responsible for their actions. But at the same time, they're living with you. So you are responsible for your household, and you will be asked about those who live in your household. So the condition should be that they fear Allah, they're obedient to Allah. Like, think of it when you have a roommate, for example, and you're the one that is agreeing to have that roommate. You have to wake them up for salah. It is not permissible to live with someone that doesn't wake up for salah, for example. No sins are to be committed in the household. That is not to be allowed under any condition whatsoever. And to enforce this and to make sure that it's not being done. Things that happens behind one's back, what a person can do, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when it comes to making conditions, you have to be careful, especially with the sons and daughters. It's, inshallah, hopefully if they're raised properly, then they would listen to this, but don't make them overburdened or not listening to what is being done. We have to use wisdom, of course. And if it's a way that they would agree, you never know when is the time where the hearts will be open for the benefits of the lecture to come into their hearts. So wisdom and balancing things out, this is something that can be done. But it's not a right or wrong type of situation. And to agree upon the obedience of Allah and to establish the deen and things of that nature. But it's, you can do whatever you want in your household, and people have to abide with what you do. It's just an advice for those who are in charge of the household, not to make it too difficult for those who are present. No. طيب, barakallahu fikum. And if you have any questions or anything that is not clear, please send messages, and hopefully we can try to answer it, inshallah. barakallahu fikum. طيب, صلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.